Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today the retro game I want to look at is the Resident Evil remake on the GameCube, which is also available with an HD version on the PlayStation 4 era of consoles. Now I love the Resident Evil franchise. I've made no mistake about that on my channel. There's tons of videos about the Resident Evil franchise, even ranked them and for the mainline entries. So I wanted to talk about the original Resident Evil. And I guess I'm going to be specifically talking about the remakes. It's been a long time since I've experienced the very original game, but the remake is mostly a very faithful adaptation with some new extras built in to make it a more complete experience, a more enjoyable experience as well. So first and foremost, this takes place at the Spencer Mansion, the most iconic location in all of Resident Evil. You play as either Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield, who are investigating some mysterious thing that's happening at the Spencer Mansion, and they get chased down by these wild zombie dogs, and they get locked in the mansion. They have to find their way out and figure out what's going on. You get to choose as either of the characters, and depending on who you choose, you get a variety of different things. I don't remember everything that you get. It's been just a little bit of time since I've played as Chris, but as Jill, you get some little perks, and Chris, you get your perks as well. So abstain from those. You can go check out like a Wikipedia page to find out the specifics on that. But you get different things depending on who you choose. You also get different scenarios in the game. You can like save certain NPCs, or certain NPCs can die based on your actions depending on the character that you pick. It's really interesting. I like that they started doing this divergent path thing so early on in the series. I like that you have more options and gives you more replayability. They do this with a lot of the games, and I think it's really genius. I really like playing as Jill. I think she's really fun to play as. That's just my personal pick. Now, Resident Evil Remake is super good because it introduces a nice little new mechanic from the original that's not present in the original game in Lisa Trevor. She's kind of similar to Nemesis Mr. X in that she is pervasive throughout the game. You'll encounter her several times. She doesn't chase you like Nemesis does, but you will find her and you'll have to encounter her several different times. She has a very tragic story. It's a really sad enemy to fight. She's incredibly strong, and finally defeating her is kind of a nice relief, but it's also very sad. That's what this game actually does really, really well, is the boss encounters. Lisa Trevor is a really cool addition in the remake, but you have other bosses like a giant snake, which is admittedly probably the easiest boss in the game, but terrifying to look at. A giant spider, which I'm sure kills everybody with arachnophobia. You have a giant shark, which is, I think, the scariest and possibly the hardest boss in the entire game. It's definitely the most tense moment in the entire game. You go into a place where you're like knee-high in water, there are sharks going around you, and then there's a scripted attack from this monstrous shark. It's absolutely horrifying. I had nightmares growing up from this boss fight specifically, because I just thought it was so terrifying to be in this place with all these sharks. You have other things like the Tyrant, the introduction of like the main big bad zombie type, and it's a very fun fight at the very end of the game. It's not the most challenging in the game, but it is very scary, and seeing the Tyrant and getting to fight it for the very first time is a really iconic moment in the series. You have tons of great boss fights. You have great normal encounters as well. The zombies are pretty terrifying. I still remember the very first time I saw the zombie turn its head in the GameCube version. It's horrifying. That part was so scary, and it's just one zombie, and you'll get much scarier hurdles throughout the game, but that one is really terrifying just because of how well they animated that and how well that they scripted this moment for you to discover that zombies are the problem here. Then another iconic moment is the dogs jumping through the window. That will scare me every single time without fail, even if I know it's coming. It's absolutely terrifying. One of the main critiques that people have with the original Resident Evil now, like going back and playing it now, is the tank controls, which I totally understand. It's kind of weird how if you you can only aim straight, up and down, and when you're pointing up, it doesn't look like you're anywhere close to shooting the zombie, but you get him in range and the hitbox works. It's kind of janky and weird, but it's very charming, and I think it's nice to preserve this part of like the horror genre because you don't see it anymore, because it does feel archaic and clunky, but it was really cool back in the day. It added a lot of horror for the game in general. The fixed camera angles give you a lot to play on. I know there's one specific part where you can go into a room and there's a mirror and you can see a zombie coming up through the hallway like toward you, and you got that fixed camera angle so you wouldn't be able to see it otherwise, but you can hear it, and then once it gets in range you can see it in the mirror. It's really brilliant and genius how they script these moments to make everything feel more tight and compact and really terrifying. You also have the Crimson Head versions of zombies. You can kill the zombie, and if you don't light their corpse on fire and burn them out, they will come back later as a Crimson Head, which is a very fast, very powerful, terrifying enemy. They are the worst. I hate Crimson Heads so much. There's even a Crimson Head boss fight that you can encounter that is just awful. I hated that too. Really terrifying fight, probably the hardest fight if it's not the shark. This one's also pretty horrifying and pretty terrifying. But I love what they did with this game. I think this is probably one of the scariest in the entire franchise, and probably one of the scariest games in like the genre as a whole. It definitely has its campy moments, but that's very on par for the Resident Evil series and in horror, I guess, in general, in like the movie space. Having those schlocky like comedy moments kind of takes away the edge so that you can keep pressing on. And I like that balance that Resident Evil is able to strike most of the time. Sometimes I don't think they pull it off exactly, but I think in the remake it works really, really well. You even have the iconic, like, you know, the Jill sandwich line from the original. They revamp it in the remake, and so it's not nearly as cringy, but it's still very funny. I just love the dialogue in this game. I like that they did make it more cohesive and better. It's not like the terrible 1996 quality, and it's not that much further in the future. I believe this one came out in 2002, but it is substantially better in terms of the quality of the writing and the delivery and everything. I think as a package, Resident Evil is still a phenomenal horror experience, and one that a lot of people should go check out. It's one that it's such a nice piece of the Resident Evil history, and with apparently no remake of the original coming in the next couple of years, I think you should go out and check this one out if you're a fan of the Resident Evil franchise, especially if you've just gotten into the remakes with 2, 3, and 4. You should go back and play the game that really started it all. It's a fantastic time. You can get it for really cheap. You can get the Origins collection and get Resident Evil 1 and 0 together. There's just no reason not to try it if you're a fan of the horror franchise. It does take some time to get used to the controls. I know tank controls are not everyone's cup of tea. I don't personally love them, but I don't think they're too hard to work with either. I think the fixed camera angles and some of the enemies and the room layouts and the puzzles of this game are just really top tier and so fun to experience. So I really want more people to experience them, especially as a lover of the franchise itself. The original Resident Evil is a perfect combination of horror and that schlocky comedy that goes along with these games. I think they meld it together really well, and some of probably the best puzzles in the entire franchise as well. I'm going to give the original Resident Evil, I guess the remake here on the GameCube, a platinum rank. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.